Greetings, parish orphans and retrogrades. Today, I've promised a deep dive episode into Rerum Novarum, the greatest social encyclical in the history of the church. It's also noted as the first social encyclical in the history of the church. It encapsulates pretty much all of Catholic social teaching together with Quadragesimo Animo, which is a Pius XI encyclical circulated 40 years after Rerum Novarum. Rerum Novarum is from, of course, the greatest uncanonized pope in the history of the church, Leo XIII, published in 1891. I'm going to give you some important background facts you'll never hear anywhere else about its penning. And it would be doctrine developed the real way, the actual conceptual organic development that is characteristic of true Catholic teaching, let alone social teaching, in 1931 under Pius XI in this document called Quadragesimo Anno. And if you think that, I'm stretching, or you've heard your Catholic teacher stretch to say Quadragesimo Anno is the part 2 of Rerum Novarum, it's not. It literally means 40 years after Rerum Novarum. It's called the 40th year. And JP2 would do one 100 years later in 1991 called Centesimus Annus. Is not as good or as important as the one or two really important developments of Rerum Novarum in Quadragesimo. I repeat, here in the early pontificate of Leo XIV, where we're all waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen in a sort of COVID-like environment where people are censoring each other and others from saying common sense things. We're waiting to see what Leo XIV does. But he says he took his name because of Leo XIII and because of specifically Rerum Novarum. Now, in today's episode, I'm offering you a deep dive, really, really granular look at the first 2/3 of Rerum Novarum. It's like 63 or 64 paragraphs. Some of them are quite long. It's really important. And then we're going to go through the last third of it, along with one of Leo XIII's other misunderstood encyclicals called Longinqua, about his deep love for America. Longinqua, together with Rerum Novarum, which really typifies American economic relations quite well, are, you could see, really important to Americans, particularly under the new era of an American pope, a first ever American pope who took his name for Leo. So this is really timely stuff. And both of these encyclicals by Leo XIII, he what did he promulgate? 85 or 86 encyclicals. The guy was a monster, called the Thomistic Pope, greatest non-canonized pope ever. Hopefully, Leo XIV will canonize Leo XIII. But he dealt with, in Longinqua, American relations, and we're going to do that on Wednesday, along with the final third of the Rerum Novarum show. They're both of special moment to this book, Catholic Republic. This book centers on basically these two encyclicals by Leo XIII. So they're near and dear to my heart. I was setting up a doctoral dissertation that would have involved some combination of these two, Longinqua and Rerum Novarum, in Rome when I was studying there, when my first daughter, Abby, was born sick. And I am still playing the long game at a doctoral in a doctorate program. I have a dear friend and former student who's working on important work involving Rerum Novarum, one of my very best friends. And so and we talk about it all the time. So Longinqua and Rerum Novarum are cited up and down in Catholic Republic. So if you want to understand an even deeper deep dive than today's, they're here. I mean, I'll cite from Longinqua, one of the very first quotes ever in the book on Wednesday. But that's the Longinqua show, how much he loved America, how deeply misunderstood his doctrine of so-called Americanism is. But before we can do that, we have to do 2/3 of Rerum Novarum today, paragraph by paragraph. Not going to go through it all, just going to give you the highlights. And then the final third of Rerum Novarum on Wednesday. And you're going to see that the standard fare, moronic, S-lib, sort of fat, mediocre, just an undergrad degree from whatever, Tallahassee JUCO, theology teacher, a woman theology teacher that most of us had in the 90s or early 2000s that said, Rerum Novarum, that's liberal, is utter nonsense. We're going to obliterate that. In a second, actually, Steffi, could we put up the excellent outline? It's detailed. You might not be able to see tons, but I want to put it on the screen by Bishop Williamson of SSPX fame, who just understands it well. And the guy had a massive intellect, and people with massive intellects understand misunderstood problems so well. It is absolutely an obliteration of socialism. That's what Rerum Novarum is. The problematic that is used as a rationale for socialists to come in and to obscure right reason and good civil government are addressed in an authentic Catholic way. But at first, Leo XIII makes clear that socialism is the ultimate enemy of this encyclical. And we have to, I'm going to say, did you know Thomas Aquinas did not fully count private property among our natural rights? This is one of the change. This is the change in teaching stood for by Rerum Novarum. Before we get into Rerum Novarum, I just want to say it stands for these two important actual changes, real developments in Catholic doctrine. Number one, write this down. Prior to Rerum Novarum, prior to 1891, prior to Leo XIII, private property was not a natural right. It was not counted among the natural rights for Roman Catholics. Full stop. Aquinas marks it in two places as a corollary, a necessity, an adjacent of the needs of human life and natural reason. So it's natural law adjacent for Thomas Aquinas, who's got pretty much all of the answers for Catholics. But Leo XIII, the Thomistic Pope, using a surprise historical philosophical figure, upgrades private property from natural law adjacent to one of the natural law rights, natural rights, in 1891 with this document. Number two change in teaching is Leo XIII will introduce a huge, basically the Catholic social principle, the way that good government is supposed to interact with a good body politic, called subsidiarity, massively misunderstood. He introduces this concept. Here, the concept isn't named until Quadragesimo Anno, but the concept is introduced in the 40th or 41st paragraph. We're going to get to it today, maybe the 39th. The concept is there. Brand new Catholic doctrine, important Catholic doctrine. These are two of the most important Catholic doctrines. And both of them square with this surprise philosophical figure that is used to upgrade the Thomistic understanding of property. Pretty much take Thomas to almost always be right. Bump it up a little bit. Also bump up subsidiarity in importance a little bit using Thomas, 98% plus this question mark figure I'm going to read to you in a second as the guide to reify this second most important doctrine. So if you have any doubt that Rerum Novarum is one of the most important encyclicals of all time, not only the most important social encyclical, then buckle up. You're going to learn a lot in today's show. And also, I'll just say this before we take a little quick break. By Leo XIV taking the name successor to Leo XIII, nominal successor, the expectations are and should be placed highly upon him. And I, of course, as a Leo XIII expert and a huge aficionado of Leo XIII, and as someone who studied at the school where this document was published, I expect nothing but the finest, clearest teaching on private property rights and subsidiarity and all the other mini doctrines it lays out. And I'm waiting with bated breath. It's interesting he's called Leo XIV. There is a ton of COVID 20 and 19 type finger wagging right now, and the trad Catholics are doing it. It's really weird. I have reasons to be skeptical, but I want to do productive shows as we allow Leo XIV to show himself. So that's why we're going to real substantive analysis that most of the other Catholic shows out there don't and really can't do.
Somebody in chat is asking for a definition of subsidiarity.
We'll get that. So subsidiarity is, if you look in even Merriam-Webster's, has a few different definitions. The best definition is supplied by, and it's really all about Chapter 2. If you want to understand subsidiarity and its role in good government and its role in America, when America stood for good government before the Civil War, it's Chapter 2 of this book. I just go at it. It's some of the clearest writing I ever did in my first book. I spent like the better part of a decade on this book, making stuff clearer and clearer and clearer. And Chapter 2 is all about constitutional subsidiarity. So I'll give you one of the definitions. I'll give you the definition that Pius XI gave for subsidiarity, but let me do that in due course. Just so I don't get thrown off my stride here. And I was really gonna get to it at the end of. I'll get to it at the end of this show. Okay. It's I believe it's footnote 108 in Catholic Republic. I'll read it once now. This is a paragraph beginning on the bottom of page 88 in Catholic Republic. Buy this book if you don't have it. Chapter 1 is all about natural law and natural rights. Chapter 2 is all about subsidiarity. Chapter 3 is all about virtue ethics. Chapter 4 is all about how separation of church and state is evil. We'll get to that on Wednesday. America stood for the proposition that separation of church and state is evil until 1947. Chapter 5 is all about what is good economics. And 6 is all about science and technology and Aristotelianism. Now, I write, Pope Pius XI formally coined the term subsidiarity in 1931 in the encyclical Quadragesimo Anno. In that encyclical, Pius expresses that just as it is gravely wrong to take from individuals what they can accomplish by their own initiative and industry and give it to the community, huge theme we're going to see in Rerum today, so also is it an injustice and a grave evil and disturbance of right order to assign to a greater and higher association, meaning to give a role to government that the father holds as governor of his family, what lesser and subordinate organizations can do. Although it was Pope Pius XI who gave the concept of subsidiarity its name, it was Pope Leo XIII who 40 years earlier had distilled Thomas Aquinas' political philosophy into the concept later known as subsidiarity. In fact, Pope Pius heavily quoted Pope Leo's earlier encyclical Rerum, which itself had just paraphrased Thomas Aquinas. The child belongs to the father. You're going to see again and again and again in Rerum Novarum today. Not to the state. Upon those short 6 words rests the entire basis of Catholic subsidiarity. It establishes the duty of the parent to look after, provide for, educate, and nurture the child. The Oxford English Dictionary puts subsidiarity even more tersely. This is the best definition for subsidiarity. Lots of agitators and liars mistake it on purpose. Here's the real definition. Central authority should have a subsidiary function performing only tasks which cannot be performed effectively at a more immediate or local level. That means it is a grave injustice and evil, as Pius XI will write somewhere in Quadragesimo Anno. It is a grave injustice and evil for a higher authority like central government to take anything that's in the competent legislative field of a lower authority. This means generically, if there's a power that generically, not specifically, a father is capable of legislating, then it's a grave evil, the collective equivalent of a mortal sin, for the state to do it. And fathers can do almost everything for their families, but like fight wars, police the polis they live in, things like that. So so the proper definition of subsidiarity, I just read you Pius's and the whatever the Merriam-Webster or Oxford Dictionary definition, most importantly inclines toward very small government. You know, it's a grave evil for a higher association like central government to take anything that's within the generically defined legislative field of like a father or the next level of community, which is like the church, which even arguably most almsgiving shouldn't be taken from public taxation. It should come from the church. It's only what's generically impossible at that level. Okay, so we'll get more on this as we get into Rerum. For now, I want to encourage everyone to go to www.realestateforlife.org, get out of your blue state, get to a red state today. We still don't know what's going to happen. It's 2025 after all. We just had an unexpected Catholic election at the Conclave of Cardinals. We had an unexpected 2024 late year election with President Trump, an assassination attempt, actually 3 assassination attempts, if you didn't know. And things just keep getting weirder. You gotta be, this is another teaching of subsidiarity, in a true res publica. That means in a place where people act like you, believe like you, and for the most part look like you. That's why it's bad to hang out in a blue state where you can't go borrow a cup of sugar or flour from your neighbor because they're all libs or they're all criminals or criminal libs. It's all bio-Leninism in blue states. So it's wrong from Catholic social teaching to willingly continue to live in a place that's not a true republic. Your truest republic is your state, not the continent of North America. That's absurd. Or the big mongrel of what's called the USA. It's your state. There are 50 of them. realestateforlife.org. Also, if you want to support the channel, please mainly just help us by clicking subscribe. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. Click subscribe today, smash the like button, leave a comment. You can ask super chat questions throughout the show. I'll answer them at the end. If you want to support beyond that, it's locals. I've been fired from jobs for speaking the Catholic truth. I've been kicked out of Patreon for speaking the Catholic truth.
Kicked out of towns.
Kicked out of towns. It's a dangerous job doing this, and we do need your support. Please become a locals supporter today. If you just want to donate, you can click donate on timothyjgordon.com. A lot of people do that because they know the lengthy story of our firstborn Abby, which is why I had to give up newly acquired doctoral studies in Rome, Italy at the Pontifical Gregorian University. And that's a whole saga. She's now about to turn 17. Crazy story. But
I can't believe she's almost that old.
It's wild. But you can either donate, which means you don't get anything back, or if you become a locals supporter, then you get lots of cool interchanges and stuff for free, and basically the equivalent of the interchange tier levels of Patreon, which locals mimics. Okay, so most important preliminary note, and I knew I would do this because it's such a huge topic, Rerum Novarum. I knew I wouldn't jump right into just paragraph 1. You need an introduction. It's the most lied about encyclical ever. It is purely against socialism, and it really ends up addressing what's the relationship between employees and employers, labor and capital, as Leo the 13th calls it. Because the socialists had been, for about 40 years at that point, giving spurious solutions to the problems that had arisen between labor and capital. And their spurious solutions were socialistic. Destruction of private property and private contract. Private property and private contract. And Rerum Novarum is going to say, no, private property and private contract are basically Catholic recognized natural rights. And there are two big doctrines introduced by Leo here, huge, like political science doctrines. One, private property is a natural right. Protestants, I'm sad to say, had acknowledged this before the Catholic Church, because to that point, Thomas Aquinas had called it, 99% of a natural right, a corollary, a need of natural reason and natural rights, but not quite a natural right. Leo changes that in 1891. And then number 2, he comes up with the concept of subsidiarity. Huge for localism, for what's called in America basically states' rights. Federalism is subsidiarity in the American context. And both Leo and then Pius will unpack that. Okay, so did you know that this document had 3 ghostwriters? They're all from the Pontifical Angelicum University, the University of St. Thomas in Rome. I studied at this school for some coursework as I worked toward the licentiate, which was eventually toward the doctoral degree. Their names are Luigi Tapparelli, Matteo Liberatore, and Tommaso Zigliata. They prepared Rerum Novarum for Leo XIII, and the mystery English Protestant Enlightenment philosopher that they channeled with Thomas is none other than John Locke. Now, Locke had already for over 100 years, he's a Whig, an English Whig party practitioner, one of the favorites of later Whigs, along with Algernon Sidney. Locke had long said that private property was a natural right. So he technically beat us to the punch on that, though Aquinas, 600 years before that, had said it was everything but a natural right. It was natural right adjacent. But there's some very conspicuous ways that Leo, through his 3 ghost authors, Tapparelli, Liberatore, and Zigliata, adapted the teaching on property more than just the conclusion about it, that it's a natural right, but the kind of reasoning about it that was explicitly Lockean. These guys were part Lockean in their reasoning, and you guys out there have been taught to hate Locke. Locke's an Enlightenment liberal. Locke hated the church. Locke's a corpuscularian. These are all true things. But when he's talking about private property and implicitly about private contract, Locke is quite based. So understand this. When you hear Catholics just reflexively, oh, I hate the Enlightenment's evil. John Locke is blah, blah, blah. Well, we would not have the Catholic teaching fully understood on either private property as a natural right or subsidiarity without the minor tweaks that Leo XIII decided to make to the Thomistic teaching on these 2 doctrines. It's very, very important. Very, very important. People don't understand that. It's fashionable for Catholics to take a poo-poo on Locke, but Leo XIII actually magisterialized his view of labor conversion of property. We're going to talk about what this is. I tweeted this before Christmas, and someone said, time for an in-depth show on this topic, bro. I didn't know that 5 months later, I'd be doing a show because there'd be an American Pope who seems to be an enigma. I'm not going to talk too much about that. All the liberals voted for him, but we're being asked to consider that somehow he's really conservative. I don't know. What time will tell, I guess. But an American Pope that takes the name Leo XIV, which I was suggesting and others out there were suggesting, what should the next Pope be called? Well, it'll be Leo XIV or Pius XIII if he's based.
Isn't that the name when we were just like playing around when we said, what would you be known as? You'd be known as Leo XIV.
He's my favorite Pope. And he's not even canonized yet. No matter how bad or good Leo XIV ends up being, hopefully he will canonize Leo XIII. So this is a hot topic. And let's get into the paragraphs now, understanding that at the Angelicum, where I studied, I took a class on Thomas and Islam. That was amazing. Steph, you sat in on it a couple times.
Yep.
You had 3 Lockean Catholics, Lockean Thomists, who were not spinning fake gold out of yarn or whatever Rumpelstiltskin did, wheat. What was it? They weren't making this up.
Oats, I have no idea.
they actually they took Locke's labor conversion theory of property that when you labor on, say, chopping down a tree, you labor on it and you chop it down, and then all of a sudden you have a stack of firewood for the night if it's cold. Or if it's warm, you just have a useless stack of firewood that you're not going to use. But it's yours largely because, not only because, but largely because you labored on it. That's a uniquely Lockean idea that is endorsed by Leo the 13th in here. That's added. Thomas doesn't have that anywhere in his theory of property. That's added by Tapparelli, Liberatore, Zigliaria, and Leo says, that's good. I'm going to take that. And because of now there's a stronger covalent bond of causality showing how labor is related to property. And it's that Lockean basis. Thomas is 99% of this property theory, but Locke is the last 1%. Now, Leo the 13th feels more confident in robustly declaring that property is a natural right. So he actually changes a little bit of Thomistic philosophy in, I'd say, a healthy way. And we've prefaced it a lot. So right away, this is right-wing talk. There's a lot. Can we put that Williamson thing on the screen, Steph? Sure. There's a lot of idiotic Twitter talk about Roman Catholicism being, what was it? So I don't. It was someone Ed Fazer was dialoguing with. Well, it's socially kind of progressive, but it's religiously and morally right wing. Well, how would that even work? That's an idiotic thing to say. Socially, the social paradigm, the social fabric of a given body politic depends on the ens commune, the common good. And if you don't have a common good that's built, Pope Leo XIII says it around paragraph 30 here, that's built around morality. That's the main reason we have civil society, is morality. Aristotle says it and Thomas says it. Then you can't have social goods the way the socialists wanted. So to say that you could be socially progressive or left while being for right-wing principles is absurd. And we're just gonna obliterate this notion.
The writing of this image is a bit small, so I don't know how much. It's a little bit harder to see. So I'm trying to figure out a way to show it full screen.
I knew it would be. I knew it would be tricky.
Okay, let me see.
Okay, so starting around the fourth paragraph. If we just keep it up, people can, I don't know, take a screenshot of the screen, maybe with your actual camera if you want it. I can. Did
you tweet this out?
No, I'll tweet it out. Maybe I'll tweet it out right at the end of the show. Okay. So if you want it, just go on Twitter and grab it. It's really nifty and it's really elegant in terms of it's like the best little outline for a pretty long document I've ever seen.
And if your locals are Subscribestar, I'll put that on there for you today, so you don't have to worry about it. So it'll be up there on Tim's page.
So the primary concern in Rerum Novarum is socialism. It's an absolute evil. Leo the 13th is bombing it left and right. And the main reasons that he takes up the ostensible concern of the socialists is just to say, they're addressing this problem between labor and capital. There are little problems which arise between labor and capital. This is nothing new. It's part of human nature. We're going to give you the Catholic solution to these problems and show you that socialism offers false solutions to these problems. Paragraph 4. So he just says that in paragraphs 1, 2, and 3. This is against socialism. Paragraph 4. To remedy these wrongs, the socialists, working on the poor man's envy of the rich, see how right-wing the rhetoric is right out of the gate, are striving to do away with private property and contend that individual possessions should become the common property of all, to be administered by the state or by municipal bodies. So they hate that. We absolutely reject as Catholics the abolition of private property. They hold that by thus transferring property from private individuals to the community, the present mischievous state of things will be set to rights, inasmuch as each citizen will then get his fair share of whatever there is to enjoy. But their contentions are so clearly powerless to end the controversy that were they carried into effect, the working man himself would be among the first to suffer. Pretty clear. So Leo is saying, he says in paragraphs 1, 2, and 3, socialism's evil. The socialists are rascals. And that they list these wrongs and then false solutions to them. Kind of like our critique of the red pill. They list these real wrongs of feminism, but then they carry you in the exact opposite direction. They give you feminism for men, more population control, more promiscuity, more anti-marriage stuff, more men and women hate each other stuff. So you get what I'm saying here. The socialists are the central theme of Rerum Novarum. Paragraph 4, the first one that we're looking at critically, says they're offering straight up lying, dissimulative solutions to the problems that they claim to solve. In paragraph 5, it's the end that I think is really most interesting. It begins with, like, it's undeniable that when a man engages in labor, the impelling reason and motive of his work is to obtain property and thereafter to hold it as his very own. Okay, so you kind of know that. And he goes on, he's very verbose, but very technical. It's satisfying, it's good sentence structure, but some of it's a little repetitive. The end of paragraph 5 is where it gets interesting. Socialists, therefore, by endeavoring to transfer the possessions of individuals to the community at large, strike at the interest of every wage earner, since they would deprive him of the liberty of disposing of his wages. Now, that's the liberty of contract, which is sort of broadly considered liberty. Liberty of contract means you get to alienate your wages and alienate your labor as you will. And this is an endorsement of not only private property, but private contracting. Very early on in the document, socialists, by endeavoring to transfer the possessions of individuals to the community at large, strike at the interest of every wage earner, since they would deprive him of the liberty of disposing of his wages and thereby of all hope and possibility of increasing his resources and of bettering his condition of life. So within paragraph 4 and 5, you pretty much have a guarantee that this document is going to count not only private property as not a new Catholic natural law right or natural right, but a new acknowledgement, a bit more robustly than Thomas was willing to go about private property. But now in paragraph 5, private contract as well. To be right wing in a legal sense means you stand up for private property and private contract, private liberty of contract. Life, liberty, property, right? And of course, you believe in life. I mean, that's what chapter 1 of Catholic Republic's about. I just show life, liberty, property. There are very few natural rights. Life, liberty, property are the main 3. Socialists created all these other rights that pertain to humans that are fake, but life, okay, or pro-life, property, this is a Lockean concept. Leo buys into enough Locke to say, okay, I'm making a change in 1891. And contract, liberty of contract, stood for in one of the first 5 paragraphs at the end of paragraph 5. Paragraph 6 begins with a sentence, what is of far greater moment, however, is the fact that the remedy they propose is manifestly against justice. So then he goes on and he just says, the socialists are rascals. They are liars. They are villains. They pose false solutions. He repeats himself a fair bit in this, but I just want you to see that all those Susans, in one case, an actual Susan I remember from the 90s, Catholic school, just lie about Rerum Novarum. And they don't really know what they're talking about anyway, but they had been lied to in the 70s and 80s about Rerum by their bishops and priests. This document just blows out of the water any hope of Catholic socialism. Man has by his nature the right to possess property as his own, by his nature. So there's a natural, there it is, right at the beginning of paragraph 6. Now I'm going to skip over a lot of that because I'm already being repetitive. I just don't want you to miss the momentousness of Leo the 13th changing in a totally good, licit, organic, developmental way, Catholic teaching on what is private property. Private property is ... Love is, life is. Private property is a natural right, not just a corollary of natural reason, which was very close to a natural right, but that's all Thomas was willing to call it. Repeats that throughout paragraph 6. We go to the bottom of 6, and I'm going to read that. It is the mind or reason, which is the predominant element in us who are human creatures. It is this which renders us a human being human and distinguishes him essentially from the brute. Animals don't have reason. They can't go to heaven. They don't have a rational will or intellect. And on this very account, that man alone is among the animal creation is endowed with reason. We are the rational animal. I remember idiot like Puritans in my audience once got mad at me for giving the Catholic Socratic Platonic Aristo definition of what a man is, a specific difference, rational animal. We're the one animal with a rational soul. It must be within his right to possess things not merely for temporary and momentary use, which is called a usufructuary right. The usufructuary right. It's not a real right. Water rights at law, for instance, I know a lot of this too because I was for a year a contract attorney. Water rights are considered usufructuary rights. Thomas Jefferson said famously, "The earth belongs in usufruct to the living." It means only while you kind of possess it do you have a right to use it, like water law. Water resides in your land, you can use it, but then if it flows to someone else's land, like a river, it's not yours. So it's not a real property right; it's a usufructuary right. So you got to understand a combo of these things. Yes, it's theology, but it's really philosophy and legal principles that give you a proper understanding of these things. A lot of times theologians who haven't studied philosophy or law just don't understand them, what they're saying. Not merely for temporary and momentary use, usufructuary, as other living things do, but to have and to hold them in stable and permanent possession, he must have not only things that perish in use, but also those which, though they have been reduced into use, continue for further use for later times. Okay? This is why when you hear idiotic woke arguments about, say, early America, the natives were running around, not that they were animals, but like animals. They didn't understand that property can be private. They didn't know that's called a fee simple. It's a deep property law concept, the fee simple, that you can actually own a piece of the earth. They didn't have that. They just ran around killing buffaloes, killing each other. They never made a fee simple property claim to any piece of the earth. So it's really not that we stole any land from them. They just used it as if it was usufructuary, kind of like the animals. You have to understand that. I'm not trying to be provocative now. I'm just saying this is the philosophy and law answer to why wasn't this deeply wrong for Europeans to come over here and to impose Catholic ideas, Western civilizational ideas are just Catholic ideas, on, say, property law. Well, because of this. Paragraph 7. It begins with the sentence, "This becomes still more clearly evident if man's nature be considered a little more deeply." And he just goes on for most of the paragraph about how man's faculty of reason makes him totally different from the animals. It's a bit redundant, but it's really philosophically, as Leo XIII, the Thomistic Pope, was very thorough. But I'm skipping through all that. Man is the rational animal, and this is why he alone can have rights. You guys, I was going to say, remember, there's an idiotic philosopher named Peter Singer, just a dolt, who thinks that animals have rights. You have to have an intellect and a rational will to have rights. Enough said. But at the end of paragraph 7, he says, "Nature accordingly must have given to man a source that is stable and remaining always with him, from which he might look to draw continual supplies. And this stable condition of things he finds solely in the earth and its fruits. There is no need to bring in the state." So this also is a Lockean idea, that man can and does have property rights prior to entering into the state of nature, that you hear about with Rousseau and Locke and Hobbes. The Lockean, man has property rights prior to entering into society, the ens commune, the common bond of living under a body politic. Prior to the need to bring in the states. He still enjoys a private property right. Man precedes the state. This is sounding really Lockean. And possesses, prior to the formation of any state, the right of providing for the substance of his body, which he just defined in the two previous paragraphs, 5 and 6. That's called a private property right. Whoa, this is really Lockean. Yeah, sorry if you were kind of trained to hate Locke. This is 95% Thomas, 5% Locke. Before I said 99 and 1, but it's a little more Locke than you're thinking. And there's nothing wrong with that. Locke gets property and contract very right. He gets religion and epistemology really, really wrong. He's a corpuscularian. That is true. Idiotic. But property and contract Locke is based on. And so were a lot of the other English Whigs, even though they were Protestants and Enlightenment thinkers. They did. Hey, in this book, once again, buy it. This is the best use of your time if you want to learn this stuff in even greater depth. Thomas Jefferson was reading in his library Bellarmine, who Bellarmine says a lot of this political philosophy stuff. Bellarmine and Suarez. Jefferson had Bellarmine in his library. John Adams allegedly had read Wanda Mariana, the Catholic Salamancan thinker. As a matter of fact, that other leading Whig light besides John Locke, named Algernon Sidney, was accused during his lifetime of plagiarizing Bellarmine. And he's like, well, my philosophy is really similar. Yeah. Whether he plagiarized it or not, they're both sort of philosophers of nature, like Aristotle and Thomas. The Whigs just could only do it very partially because they were Protestant. They're coming up with the exact same stuff. And Jefferson and Adams et al., a lot of them had read Catholics and their Whig copycats like Sidney and Locke. It's important. Okay, paragraph 8. It starts out with this sentence. The fact that God has given the earth for use and enjoyment of the whole human race can in no way be a bar to the owning of private property. So he's saying because, and he's going to get really Lockean in a second, because God gives the earth to all humans. So isn't this socialism, bro? This is what moron liberals in the 90s and early 2000s were saying about Rerum. Nope. He says, for God has granted the earth, paragraph 8, sentence 2, for God has granted the earth to mankind in general, not in the sense that all without distinction can deal with it as they like, but rather that no part of it was assigned to anyone in particular, and that the limits of private possession have been left to be fixed by man's own industry and by the laws of individual races. Well, how does man's own industry help in this property partitive sense? Partitive meaning how do we divide it in this property allocative sense? How does this work? He's going to go on and endorse, after paragraph 8, the labor theory of property. Not the labor theory of value, but the labor theory of property. Strictly Lockean. And again, if you don't like this, because you've been brainwashed to hate everything Locke ever said or did, the three Angelicum Thomists, Tapparelli and Zigarelli and whatever the other guy's name, the Rigatoni. They're the ones, they're the Angelicum Thomists, very conservative school. I got my degree from the Greg. That's the Jesuit school, known in its theology department for being very liberal, but it had one of the leading Thomistic philosophers in the whole world while I was there. He's still there. Shout out to Father Flannery. That's why I went to the Greg. And I took classes at the Angelicum. And I nearly transferred to the Angelicum to get my degree there, but I wanted to stick with Father Flannery, who became my mentor and who was going to let me do the dissertation I wanted to do on Aristotle and small government there.
We have Greg on the screen right now, just in case people are curious what it's right next to the Trevi Fountain. So Tim would study at the Greg, and I would go and just sit at the Trevi and wait for him till after he was done. Great times.
Yeah, great. Yeah, end times. End times now, great times then. I thought you said we had Greg on the screen. That was
no. Your alma mater.
Yeah, my alma mater.
I'll put on the Angelicum too.
Gregory is a based name. Gregoriana is a based name. One of the greatest popes. One of the other 3 or 4 handful of names. People would say, "What would your papal name be?" Huh? Gregory the 16th, man. One of the great ones. Gregory the Great. I thought we were talking about. I have a brother named Greg. All right, so he says at the end of 8, he's going to get into more Locke endorsement and without saying the L word. Hence, it may truly be said that all human subsistence is derived either from labor on one's own land or from some toil, some calling, which is paid for either in the produce of the land itself when you're working on someone else's land, or in that which is exchanged for what the land brings forth. This is labor theory of property. This is Locke. So, I mean, again, he doesn't want to use the L word because he knows it's sort of, it's not mellifluous in the ears of your typical Catholic. At that time or even now, but it's just a fact. Locke got private property and private liberty of contract so right, and he wants to do a little sprinkling of Locke onto the Thomistic teachings that are Aristotelian teachings, which really come from Book 5 of the Nicomachean Ethics and Book 3 of the Politics. So you take, and again, this is why you turn to this channel. You don't turn to this channel because I bring on other guests. Sometimes I bring on other guests, but who gets guests every time, like a Matt Fradd show? You go to Matt Fradd for the quality guests he gets. You go to this show for the quality of the ideas and the relatively fast unpacking. And I do say, this is the time for Catholic Republic. Buy this book if you haven't got it yet. Originally published here, I still have a first edition, published by Milo Yiannopoulos. He wrote a really good foreword on it. And he published it. It's only one of 3 books that Dangerous Books would ever publish. But you come here for fast understanding of ideas that if you're like, I'll just read Rerum Novarum myself, man. He's not using Locke. Unless you have a couple graduate degrees in philosophy, you're not going to spot this stuff. So we're trying to do an efficient job for you, as we always do when we go through. This is an ideas show. Even when we're assessing, hey, Leo the 14th, is he really a true successor to Leo the 13th? I don't know yet. It didn't look like it when I saw who was stumping for him, but that's not enough yet. I'm very, very skeptical. And I don't do it on the basis of gossip. I'm examining Leo the 14th and whether he'll be a good successor of Leo the 13th by using access to my friends in Rome, picking their brains. I was having an off-channel conversation with Edward Penton about this. Everyone that I talk to off channel agrees with at least enough of my skepticism to say this guy's an enigma. But while all that's going on, we're just going to allow Leo the 14th to show how truly Leonine he is. Leonine 13 he is. We want him to be Leonine 13. If he is based, you will hear it from me because I'll always tell you the truth. But while we're doing that, we're examining here today Rerum Novarum, the first 2/3 of it, and then on Wednesday, the last third of Rerum, plus Longinqua. Can you believe Leo the 13th wrote 80-something encyclicals? Do you know the exact number, Steffi?
I thought it was 88, but let me look.
It's like 88
off the top of my head. Let me look. Let's have a bet and chat. What is it? I think
the 3 longest pontificates were Pio IX, JP2, and Leo the 13th. I think those are the 3 longest. There aren't that many that went 20 years, and they all went 20 years. But even then, 88 encyclicals in Leo the 13th's 25 years. That's insane. He's writing like 3 a year.
I was right. 88.
88
Boom.
Encyclicals. He's writing 3 per year, my nerds. That's crazy. Okay, and they're all good. That's the crazy thing about Leo 13. Make this man a saint. Make Tolkien a saint. Make Leo the 13th a saint. That's what I said. Tolkien.
That would be so crazy.
That's from my boy Blue Bedoy, and Leo the 13th. Make him a saint. That's from me and just everybody else out there.
This is a list on the screen right now of all of Pope Leo's the 13th encyclicals. So yeah, 88.
So many.
Crazy. What is Rerum Novarum? Which one does that? Where does that fall in the line? Do we know?
it's 1891. So if they have dates, if this is chron order, then there you go. But I mean, you see, okay, so we gotta move it along. I'm just showing that very early on, you have Taparelli et al.'s, the three ghost authors, endorsements in really clear terms to anyone that's even moderately versed in basic Enlightenment philosophy. Very early on. By the time you get to paragraph 10, you're already like, wow, they are, if you know what you're looking at, this is Aquinas spiked with Locke by Thomistic Lockeans, not on epistemology or metaphysics. That'd be absurd. Locke's metaphysics and epistemology are absurd. He believed in corpuscles, magic atoms. But his political philosophy cheats and gets to the same place, the same rational entailments that good Catholic, Thomistic ontology and metaphysics should get you to. We'll take super chats at the end of the show. Paragraph 9. Here again, we have further proof that private ownership is in accordance with the law of nature. Boom, boom, boom. So he said it 3 times already by paragraph 9. Thomas Aquinas merely said private property is an entailment of natural reason, natural law. I'm saying here, me, Leo the 13th, known as the Thomistic Pope, I'm saying private property is actually a natural right. It's more than just natural law, natural right adjacent. It's a natural right. Truly, that which is required for the preservation of life and for life's well-being, which is those two are Thomistic, is he's going to extend the Thomistic grants just made, is produced in great abundance from the soil, but not until man has brought it into cultivation and expanded upon it his solicitude and skill. This is that Locke labor theory of property once again. It's a bit redundant, but these aren't the easiest concepts. I didn't find much of interest in paragraph 10. Paragraph 11, so this is just Locke and Thomas rolling right along. I will, man.
I'm highlighting on the screen the lines that you're reading.
Okay. About halfway through 11, he quotes, the authority of the divine law adds its sanction to the kind of natural law, saying that private property is obviously necessary as a right, forbidding us in severest terms, even to covet that which is another. So we're not even allowed to steal. Well, we're not allowed to steal what someone else's. We're not even allowed by nature or by the eternal law, the 10th commandment, to covet what's another. You're not even allowed to want to steal what's another's. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his house, nor his field, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is his. Better not covet your male neighbor's ass.
I know. I'm like such a child. Like, I can't read that line and not giggle.
No. Can't covet your neighbor's wife's ass. You can't covet your neighbor's ass. So there it be. So that's 11. So think of how deeply, thoroughly anti-socialist this Catholic teaching is. Leo the 13th, after now he's gone through, he's given a Lockean Thomistic interpretation of not only property, but property source, which is labor, whose source is liberty of contract. You have that relationship between liberty of property, liberty of contract. But now he's saying, and let's go back to the 10 commandments, which reflect the natural law and eternalize it. Even outside of time, that's what the eternal law is. The natural law pertains to humans in time. Eternal law is outside of time. It's just a basic principle. Not only can you not steal the way socialists want to foment labor to steal from capital, meaning workers to steal from their employers, but he's saying you're not even allowed the attitude of wishing to steal, which is also a mortal sin. Remember what Jesus says to the pervy, the perv dog rabbis, the rabbinical Jews? He's like, you're not allowed to commit adultery in the law of Moses, hard-hearted law given to Moses. Not hard-hearted from God's perspective or Moses's, but because the Israelites were so hard-hearted and they're perverted, right? They're always dealing with the perversion of wanting to violate the law against adultery. Jesus says, well, I'm turning up the juice on you, Juice. And I'm telling you guys that not only are you not allowed to commit adultery, you're not allowed to even look with lust. You're not even allowed to want to commit adultery. For Christians, that too is a mortal sin, to even want to commit adultery. And I mean, it shouldn't be that unique because of this commandment given to Moses. But the Jews just ignored that. Remember Dennis Prager saying like, well, that's a mental act. A mental act. You could look, if you looked at cartoon prawn, no one's being hurt and you're not committing adultery. Well, what about the proper interpretation of the covet not your wife, your neighbor's wife? And that proper interpretation is Christian, but Jews never gave it that. Well, that's what Leonine 13 is doing to the socialists here. And any Catholics that were flirting with socialism, like G.K. Chesterton and his brother, flirted very closely with social. They were in the Fabian Society. Chesterton and his brother. We're going to have people screaming in the chat.
Yeah,
I have a picture.
They're getting their vocal cords ready for this one.
For screeching like their wives. There's a picture that memorializes G.K. and his brother in the Fabian Socialist Society. Gross. And also G.K. really endorsed I think a 5-point plan that said you can't pass property to your kids. Came from the French Revolution. He never got all that socialism out of his system. That's why I'm not a GK guy. He has some great one-liners. So does Nietzsche, right? I love a lot of Nietzsche one-liners. I like a lot of GK one-liners, but neither is a good philosopher. They're both basically just philologists. Okay, so
what paragraph are we on right now? What paragraph?
We are on
12.
The bottom of 11.
Okay, gotcha.
We're not coveting 11's bottom. We are just unpacking 11's bottom sentence. And that is to say, I just made this extended analogy. I'm going to have to go a little faster, but yeah. I really am. But you're not only not allowed to steal the way these Jewish socialists want you to, you're not allowed to even fantasize about stealing. You're not allowed to steal your neighbor's wife. You're not allowed to fantasize about stealing your neighbor's wife. There's no way socialism or any of its Catholic concomitants like distributism, bro. No, nope. You can't do that because distributism also violates Rerum Novarum. Distributism also, it might not actually say you can steal your neighbor's land, but it says you can covet your neighbor's land. Envy is a major theme in this document. Paragraph 12. The rights here spoken of belonging to each individual man are seen in much stronger light when considered in relation to man's social and domestic obligations. So now he just goes through kind of what those are. I'm skipping to the bottom paragraph. Hence, we have the family, the society of a man's house, a society very small, one must admit, but nonetheless a true society, family, the single cell of civilization, and one older than any state. Again, like he says, property rights are pre-exist the state. The family pre-exists the state. Sorry if this feels a little Lockean for you guys, but this is also Thomistic. Thomas also acknowledges this. Mm-hmm. There's been some stuff that's uniquely Locke. This is just the overlap in the politics of Locke and Thomas. Really, the only non-overlap between Locke and Thomas, by the way, is that Locke thinks that the political community is synthetic. It's like not natural. Thomas says, yes, the political community postdates the family and the basic rights, life, liberty, property, but it's still a natural community, the political community. But, so, and then that's one thing Locke gets slightly wrong that Thomas gets right. But here's the thing. This is where subsidiarity comes in. Thomas didn't have the concept yet, but he's struggling to articulate what Leo will articulate. Political community can only be natural if it's small. And that's why subsidiarity is so important. Otherwise, with this big America, that is a synthetic community. Like, are you being a butt
philosopher now, Tim?
I'm not being a butt philosopher. I would never be a butt philosopher. I'm too into my wife to be a butt philosopher. Trying to figure out.
Was Locke a butt philosopher? I heard a butt there. No?
Locke was, yeah, a little bit. Okay. He's a little bit of butt philosopher insofar as he wanted the good politics of Catholic philosophy, but he didn't want the metaphysics and epistemology and philosophy of nature, from which good politics is downstream. Easier branch of philosophy. They have to come from the hardest speculative branches of philosophy higher up in the tree. So he was a butt philosopher that way. I don't think he was a butt philosopher in the same sense that a bunch of the cardinals are butt philosophers. They're butt philosophers in different sense. Not a James Martin butt philosopher.
People new to the channel are like, what is happening right now?
It's their fault for being new to the channel.
Yeah, you got to know the inside jokes, guys.
Johnny come lately.
Somebody explain it to him in chat.
So the family is a society. It's a very small one. It's nonetheless a true one and older than any state. Consequently, it has, this is bottom of paragraph 12, rights and duties peculiar to itself, which are quite independent of the state. This is the first. So we've had that first new right laid out. Not too often you have a new philosophical right laid out, or concept or teaching laid out of private property is a natural right, labor theory of property. But now here at the bottom of 12, we get the first insinuation of subsidiarity. What is it? I'll reread it. Consequently, the family has rights and duties peculiar to itself, which are quite independent of the state. Uh-oh.
Whoops.
That sounds like libertarianism. Not quite. It's not. You're going to see throughout this document that it's not that far, but it's a lot closer to libertarianism than to socialism.
How did anyone think that this is a liberal socialist document?
Because of Nancy Pelosi. Because pass the bill before you read it. Pass the bill to find out what's in it. People don't read. People talk, and I mean trads on Twitter talk about stuff that they've never read. And then they might glance through it, but they talk about stuff without studying it. You got to study it. Okay, paragraph 13. That right to property, therefore, which has been proved to belong naturally to individual persons, must then likewise belong to a man in his capacity of head of family. Oops. Nay, that right is all the stronger in proportion as the human person receives a wider extension in the family group. This means more like a tribe, a group of families, like a hamlet, where a group of families live, smaller than a township. Like we generally say in political geography, we would call this a hamlet, not to be confused with Shakespeare. Nay, that right is all the stronger in proportion as the human person receives a wider extension in the family group, the hamlet. It is a most sacred law of nature that a father should provide food and all necessaries for those whom he has begotten, not the state. I'm adding that, not the state. That's the subtext.
Or the mother.
Or the mother. Or the mother. Oh yeah, this document also strongly says no working mothers. Strongly says it. It's actually the purpose of the document, Leo would say. Leonine 13. So not the state, not the mother. Similarly, it is natural that he should wish that his children, who carry on, so to speak, and continue his personality, should be by him provided with all that is needful to enable them to keep themselves decently from want and misery amid the uncertainties of this mortal life. Now, in no other way can a father effect this except by the ownership of productive property, which he can transmit to his children by inheritance. Inheritance. So Chestertonians out there, distributists, sorry. Chesterton wanted to abolish, because the French Revolution said so, the right to pass land. Where's that, whatever, 4 acres and a mule going to come from?
And also, like, what?
Labor theory of property is the only way you get it, and you got to be able to transmit it to people. That's Thomas plus a little bit of Locke. When you say pass to children by inheritance, you're ruling out the distributists. Sorry, Steph.
I was going to say, and who decides whether I get my 4 acres and a mule, like on the coast of like Hawaii or in
Santa Barbara,
Oildale, Bakersfield, California?
Yeah. I guess G.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc, Hilaire Belloc, Chesterton's longtime pal, admitted that you have to use the force of basically a Leviathan state. Chesterton always flirted with it, but danced around it. But in Chesterton's 5-point plan, he says, we want to get rid of inheritance, which you can't do that if you're Catholic. You can't be a distributist if you're Catholic, but all the distributists are Catholic. I know, that's the problem with it. That's why I'm always shitting on it. We just had it. Let me reread it. Now, in no other way can a father effect this except by the ownership of productive property, which he can transmit to his children by inheritance. Sorry, Chestertonians. Bye-bye. There's the Dame Lillard wave. He broke my heart. Sent Russ in the Thunder from the 2016 playoffs. He gave us that wave. Bye, Chestertonians. A family no less than, and Thomas is on board for all that, by the way. That's not a Lockean addendum, passing property through inheritance. A family no less than a state is, as we have said, a true society governed by authority particular to itself, that is to say, by the authority of who? The father.
Father, not the mother.
Not the mother. And Leo would say the whole point of really rebutting the socialists in Rerum Novarum was so that we could have single income families, which were being threatened. Now we jump to the bottom of 13. We say at least equal rights. Wait, where is it? No, sorry. We say at least equal rights, for inasmuch as the domestic household is antecedent, pre-exists the state in nature, as well as an idea, in fact, to the gathering of men into a community, the family must necessarily have rights and duties which are prior to those of the community and founded more immediately in nature. Boom! That is such a strong endorsement of the right of property and inheriting property to your kids. I studied this at the University of San Diego. I'll do some call-outs here under Steve Winnell, who is a famous libertarian property professor, under Gail Harriet, who you might read often in Wall Street Journal. Did torts under her. I didn't study contract, which is her normal thing. So many great professors at the University of San Diego School of Law. Consider it if you want to set foot in the bear trap of getting a law degree. Finally, if the families on entering into association and fellowship were to experience hindrance in a commonwealth instead of help, were to find their rights attacked instead of being upheld, society would be greatly in an object of detestation rather than of desire. This is what the socialists do, and by virtue of what he just said here in paragraph 13, this closes out paragraph 13, this is what the Chestertonian distributists do. Why? Because you don't want to go into a society if it doesn't allow you to own property and to pass it to your kids. Thomas called this a corollary of natural reason and natural law, which is basically just saying it's a natural right. But Leo XIII, through his three underwriters at the Angelicum, Tepperelli et al., uses a little bit of Locke sprinkling to bump it up the extra 1% to a natural right. Now, 14, the contention then that the civil government should its option intrude into and exercise intimate control over the family and the household is a great and pernicious error. We're getting into subsidiarity here. The term will never be used, but as Pius XI will say 40 years later, these are the concepts which constitute subsidiarity. True, if a family finds itself in exceeding distress, utterly deprived of the counsel of friends, and without any prospect of extricating itself, it is right that extreme necessity be met by public aid, since each family is part of the commonwealth. Okay, so those who have libertarian impulses, and anti-authoritarian impulses, you guys have watched me long enough, I have these impulses. We have to see that Rerum Novarum is setting forth a non-libertarian document, but he's setting the boundaries really close. He's going to say, and I've read you that definition of subsidiarity, that Pius XI will develop these subsidiarian ideas with 40 years later. Only extreme necessity is where you bump, generic necessity, not specific necessity, is where you bump the what we call in law the legislative field out of valence from the family to the church to maybe local government to state government to federal government, and it's in that order. Listen though at the bottom of paragraph 14 what he says about paternal authority. You can see why I couldn't go through this whole document in 1 hour. Paternal authority, actually, Steph, can you read at the bottom of 14? I need to give my voice a rest here.
Sure.
Paternal authority can be neither abolished nor...
Paternal authority can neither be abolished nor absorbed by the state, for it has the same source as human life itself. Quote, the child belongs to the father, end quote, and is, as it were, the continuation of the father's personality. And speaking strictly, the child takes its place in civil society, not of its own right, but in its quality as a member of the family in which it is born. And for the very reason that the child belongs to the father, end quote, it is, as St. Thomas Aquinas says, and he quotes him here, before it attains the use of free will under the power and the change of its parents, end quote. The socialists, therefore, in setting aside the parent and setting up a state supervision, act against natural justice and destroy the structure of the home.
Yep. Okay. So is that clear enough to you? Me? Steph? Yeah. You're just saying, okay, so do we have...
I read this whole thing when I wrote Ask Your Husband. I went through like a lot of encyclicals, but yeah, oh man, I wish we would have added some of these verses to our Catholicism versus Feminism document, because some of these are really, I forgot about some of these. Very good. And people are asking if you're going to do a part 2 if you can't get through this, and I think the answer is yes. Right?
Yeah, I said no, it's planned. We're only going to para 41 today. We're going Rerum Novarum 1 through 41 paragraphs today, because I have to do deep dives. The deepest dive is just by buying Catholic Republic. All you have to do is really read what I call chapter 0, chapter 1, and chapter 2 to get through the subsidiarity stuff, and you'll really understand it well. And then on Wednesday, a show on the last 22 or 23 paragraph, the last third of Rerum Novarum, together with Leo XIII's other most important document for Catholic Republic called Longinqua, his love for America and his warning against Americanism. What is Americanism? It's the change that Leo XIII saw being wrought in America by Freemasons. The change would be effected in 1947. Before, separation of church and state at the state level was completely illegal, and it will become completely required and legal after 1947, because the Freemasons, you know all the other words for what Freemasons really are, on the Supreme Court changed it.
This is why, by the way, we've talked a lot about people asking, so why don't you ever use your law degree? Like Tim's, when he went to law school, this was one of the things that he was really interested in doing, was just getting that sort of education so that he can apply that to these sorts of documents and some of the things in the church. And it's really helped our family out quite a lot. Yeah.
So Steph, remember when you were writing your book and people were saying, where does this, the child belongs to the father quote come from? That's what you just read, right?
Yes.
In 14. Aristotle says it. Thomas says it. Leonine 13 says it here he's going to say it a lot in the bottom of paragraph 14. Paternal authority, not maternal authority, can be neither abolished nor absorbed by the state, which is most important. This is the first thing socialism does. It's even accomplished somewhat by distributism, which we just talked about. Distributism does not allow the inheritance from father to son of property. Distributism is marked by what's known as usufructuary rights only, which are nonsense and French revolutionary.
Which is interesting because obviously in paragraph 13, he established that the father is the authority of the household. So then he expands upon that in 14 and talks about exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, the child belongs to the father and is the continuation of the father's personality. So it's not some completely perverse thing when we see here in the South or in Texas or something, a father really living on his football dreams through his son. I mean, it's kind of gross when he's like yelling himself hoarse, but it's natural, according to Leo and Thomas. Leo's the Thomistic Pope, the continuation of the father's personality. And speaking strictly, this child takes its place in civil society, not of its own right, but in its quality as a member of the family in which it is born. And for the very reason that the child belongs to the father, he repeats it again, it is, as St. Thomas says, before it attains the use of free will, under the power and the charge of its parents. The socialists, therefore, in setting aside the parent and setting up the state supervision, are against natural justice. This is an Aristotelian concept from Book 5 of the Republic and Book 3 of the Politics of Aristotle, and destroy the structure of the home. This is what really The feminists do even more than the socialists. And he would have addressed it more if the feminists had been more robust and aggressive in 1891. They'd just gotten going the previous 43 years in 1848, and they were mainly in America at that point. Okay, so that's the end of 4.
So we're on 15 now?
Yeah, we're on 15 now.
And again, you can go to Vatican.va and you can look at this. This is what we have on the screen right now.
Do we have Bishop Williamson's? We promised Bishop Williamson's incredibly dense and impressive outline. Bishop Williamson of SSPX, what's it called? SSPX Ultra. When he got removed from SSPX, he's a brilliant man.
Yeah.
I don't, and I do, like a lot of non-SSPX guys, I do have respect for Bishop Williamson. He got fired, or whatever you call it, when you don't quite have personal prelature like SSPX doesn't quite. He got fired from SSPX for being based on the hoo-hoos. So, you got to take your hat off to him.
Right.
And then he loves this document. And, he's really a smart man. Pray for Bishop Williamson, for the soul of Bishop Williamson, right? He died earlier a year ago. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway,
I believe so. Yeah.
So we'll give you that incredibly dense, law school outline by Williamson on all of Rerum Novarum. Is what you're allowed to bring into tests, and he is like a crib sheet. It's very, very, very elegant.
I'll put that in Locals and Subscribestar on your page.
Okay, cool. And we'll do that at the end. Para 15. This is a long one where I kind of wanted to take the entire first 2/3 of it. In addition to injustice, it is only too evident what an upset and disturbance there would be in all classes, and to how intolerable and hateful a slavery citizens would be subjected without private property rights, defined the way that not only Thomas insinuates them, but Locke puts the period on. So no socialism, where you can't hold private property, and no distributism, no Chestertonianism, where you're not allowed to inherit private property, pass it to your kids. What a shitty way of life. What a slavish way of life, says Leonine 13 here. The door would be thrown open to envy. Envy's probably the main theme of what's wrong with the socialists. Mutual invective, discord. The sources of wealth themselves would run dry. Now, this is a very right-winger argument, right? If you start leveling taxes or redistributive Chestertonian socialist schemes on capital, and you give them away to labor, what's going to happen to capital? It's going to run dry. The sources of wealth themselves would run dry. I'm not claiming libertarianism here. I'm just saying it's a lot closer to that side than the other side. For no one would have any interest in exerting his talents or his industry. This is Leo 13, not Reaganomics. It's both, actually, because it's a natural principle of incentivization. And that ideal equality about which they entertain pleasant dreams, what motivates men to try to do better, to be something, would be in reality the leveling down of all to a like condition of misery and degradation. So everyone's equal, because egalitarianism is pure evil. Everyone's equal in misery and degradation on the socialist or even the distributist scheme. Hence, it is clear that the main tenet of socialism, community of goods, must be utterly rejected, since it only injures those whom it would seem meant to benefit. Is directly contrary to the natural rights of mankind. Once again, he's putting the exclamation point on there. Property is a natural right of mankind, a bit more aggressively stated than Thomas even put it, because we're sprinkling on that Lockean labor theory of property. Okay.
Sorry, apparently a plane is just taken off.
What was that?
Driveway.
I was like, is that a tornado siren? The tornado sirens are creepy. I'm not going to lie. I love the South, but
I was just thinking, this isn't our trash day, right? We're good, right?
Where do we go?
So we're on the bottom of 15.
Yeah, bottom of 15. I think 16 is a little bit boring. I think I skipped it.
With all due respect.
Sorry, Pope Leo 13. Go to 17.
Okay.
Second sentence. There
Okay.
naturally exist among mankind. This is where, so you see how he's proceeding apace? Now he just for the first time dealt with, well, what if everyone was equal? It would be slavish and servile equality. That's a second thing. Now that he approached egalitarianism by its second thing, he's going to say why egalitarianism is wrong in principle, which is the first thing. That's what he does here in 17. There naturally exist among mankind manifold differences of the most important kind. People differ in capacity, skill, health, strength, and unequal fortune is a necessary result of unequal condition. So it's a natural result that there is a natural aristoi. What Jefferson pulls out of really the Thomas Bellarminian tradition, a natural aristoi. Jefferson said it, and he gets this from Aristotle Thomas Bellarmine. We shouldn't all be the same, man. And a lot of the Chestertonians fall right into this egalitarian trap, as do the feminists. Such inequality is far from being disadvantageous either to individuals or the community. You would never hear this. I want to hear Pope Leo XIV emphasize this sentence in para 17 of Rerum Novarum, which he said made him want to take the Leonine name.
Yeah, if this is the paragraph or this is the line that inspired him, then God bless him.
Then we're in for a great couple of decades in the church. Such inequality is far from being disadvantageous either to individuals or to the community. Social and public life can only be maintained by means of various kinds of capacity for business and the playing of many parts. And each man, as a rule, chooses the part which suits his own particular domestic condition. This is anti-egalitarianism writ large. I literally wrote it in highlight lettering on my photo. I just use photos here.
They have it highlighted on the screen right now, too.
Thanks. And this is why, if you're not the rich fool in Luke's gospel, and you do things like, this is good, I'm going to support this family at my church. The guy lost his job. I'm not going to give him a loan. I'm just going to give him $10,000. If you have money, you need to give to United Way or the Red Cross. If you see someone, if your neighbor's house gets damaged by a tornado, since that's fresh on my mind, and you have extra cash and you're of means, go give him $10,000. Or people that are like, this is, thank you. All the from the donors to this channel, from the small to the great, floor to the rafters, thank you. That, if you think this is doing the work of the vineyard, maybe it's a little coarse language at times, maybe it's a little direct compared to other Catholic influencers, but this is the directest way to clean up the vineyard, is through rules for retrogrades. Thank you. I mean, sincerely, thank you. You guys who are of means do not have to feel guilty, as long as you're not parable of the rich fool, rich people. There is natural aristoi. There's natural aristoi in looks. There's natural aristoi in athleticism, as I'm always reminded this time of the year when I'm watching NBA playoffs every night. I mean, these guys, Russell Westbrook can run line to line on an NBA parquet in his 17th season twice as fast as most of the guys that ever played in the NBA in their first season. There is not an egalitarian continuum. I mean, there isn't a non-egalitarian continuum of talents, and there's a non-egalitarian continuum of silver talents, which our Lord acknowledges in the parable of the talents. There's not egalitarianism of mind or health or length of life. It's a natural principle. The socialists don't like it. The distributists don't like it. But Thomas, a little Locke sprinkled on top, and Leo and his 3 ghost riders from the Angelicum do like it. Yeah, they acknowledge it because it's nature. Such inequality is far from being disadvantageous either to individuals or the community. They can be maintained by means of various kinds of capacity for business and the playing of many parts. There's labor, which is most people, and then there's capital, the richer guys. That's not wrong. That's not a problematic that needs to be solved. That's not an explanatory gap which needs to be bridged. I mean, you can bridge it and say, well, this is good, but this is not something to be overcome or striven against. And each man, as a rule, chooses the part which suits his own particular domestic condition. Thank you. Anti-egalitarianism. I'd love to hear Leo the 13th weigh in on, or the 14th weigh in on Leo the 13th there. Unequality is good. We are Aristo-Thomist, Bellarminian, Suarezians and Leoninians as Catholics.
Say that 10 times fast.
I cannot.
I will not.
I do not like green eggs and ham. I like regular eggs and ham, but green eggs and ham, you're probably going to have you're going to be running to the restroom a lot of days. Just telling you. Para 18. In like manner, the other pains and hardships of life will have no end or cessation on earth. This is just beautiful because he's just talking about the inequality of fortune now. After he talked about the naturalness of the inequality of all the other talents you can imagine, looks, athleticism, health, skills, mind, wealth. Now he's just saying straight up fortune. For the consequences of sin are bitter and hard to bear, and they must accompany man so long as life lasts. To suffer and to endure, therefore, is the lot of humanity. Let them strive as they may. No strength and no artifice will ever succeed in banishing from human life the ills and troubles which beset it. If there are any who pretend differently, socialists, Chestertonians, who hold out to a hard-pressed people the boon of constant enjoyment, they delude the people and impose upon them, and their lying promises will only one day bring forth evils worse than the present. We saw that in the 20th century. Yeah, and feminists, so boomers will say, socialism brought about X million deaths in the 20th century. There were a lot. Socialism, national and international, brought about a lot of deaths. Sorry, people are like, I thought you said you liked the Heil Hitler song. Well, it was a pretty good song and it was funny, but I'm not a fan of any form of socialism. But the worst form of egalitarianism of the late 19th, early 20th century, happening at the same time as the variant strains of socialism, national and international, was feminism, because it destroyed the family, 99% of the families. Paragraph 19. The great mistake made in regard to the matter now under consideration is to take up with the notion that class is naturally hostile to class.
Whoops.
The classes are not naturally hostile. Labor and capital classes should not be naturally hostile. They're naturally, I don't want to sound like no homo. I'm not saying they're attracted to each other sexually, but there's a complementarianism there. Just as, it's a perfect analogy. The 19th, 20th century Mez philosophy of feminism, the 19th, 20th century Mez philosophy of socialism preaches a lie. That the difference between, on the one hand, men and women, and the difference between labor and capital should cultivate envy, and that they're naturally hostile. That's a lie. Men and women go together because of their difference. Labor and capital go together for their difference. And that the wealthy and the working men are intended by nature to live in mutual conflict. Nonsense. The gospel teaches this is nonsense. Mm-hmm. So irrational and so false is this view, and that the direct contrary is the truth. The direct contrary, meaning they should be friends. Labor needs capital. Capital needs labor. Don't listen to left Hegelians like Kojève or Marx, who teach this story like two men square off in a battle to the death. The one who prevails makes the other his slave. The slave works for the master until the slave gets big muscles and the master gets fat. And then the slave eventually throws under the master and vanquishes him or makes him his slave. And it goes back and forth throughout history. That's the Hegel left Kojèvian Marxist view of labor and capital. And it is a load of rich creamery butter.
Also like the entire movie Django Unchained, right?
Yeah.
That's like
the worst movie I've ever seen is Django Unchained. Just awful. Awful. So irrational, so false is this view that the direct contrary is the truth. They should love each other, man. They need each other. Master and slave, labor and capital. Mm-hmm. Just as the symmetry of the human frame is the result of the suitable arrangement of the different parts of the body, different members of the body. Does this sound like Christendom? Yes. So in a state is it ordained by nature that these two classes should dwell in harmony and agreement so as to maintain the balance of the body politic. Each needs the other. Capital cannot do without labor, nor labor without capital. This is like men and women. The great lie underpinning both socialism and feminism is egalitarianism. People will be hostile to each other when men outrank women. We're the bosses. We are we're not greater in dignity, but we're greater in rank. That shouldn't make women mad. Women need men, but men need women.
We're thankful for men because of that.
Yeah, the same thing with labor and capital. I mean, this is, remember. Now, we went through the beginning of this episode, lecture, whatever you want to call it, was top laden with the philosophy. But now you're just seeing we're on the bottom paragraph of 19. I'm skipping to the bottom of 19, okay. And it is just thoroughly right wing, is it not? Am I propagandizing you guys? Steph, you've never really been through every paragraph here.
I read this whole thing when I wrote Ask Your Husband.
You did a tour when you were writing Ask Your Husband. You did a tour of like 20 encyclicals. That was impressive. When this lady starts reading, she just tears through books. I'm a much slower reader, but okay. So you have been through every word of this, but I mean, upon review.
No, but I don't remember a lot of it. So this is great.
Isn't it just impressive how right wing it is? Okay, it's not libertarian, but it is so right wing. Last sentence of 19. First of all, there is no intermediary more powerful than religion, whereof the church is the interpreter and guardian, in drawing the rich and working class together by reminding each of its duties to the other, and especially the obligations of justice. So religion, the church, is the main thing which should arbit disputes between labor and capital. The best one. We just have them the bottom of paragraph 19. It's not to say the state can't do it. The state can have a safety net. Okay, that's what makes this technically non-libertarian. True. But the first turn should be, the family, maybe immediate friends. Then the church is the first big one that Rerum identifies. And now in paragraphs 20 through 40, we're going to hear, and we're going to race through this more because I'm already making the admission. They are going to say there should be a role in the state for a safety net. But the first one, they say right in 19, should be religion, the church. And it's implied through subsidiarity, it should be family and friends. If your neighbor has his house blown over by a tornado and you have extra money, you ought to go and just say, here's a check for $10,000 or whatever you can give. Mm-hmm. The most you can give, though. Not a loan. That's very Jewish. With or without interest. Not a loan. Just that's your tithing for the year. Or for whatever, according to the amount you give. So you should do that, but some people don't live in a nice part of town or don't have nice friends or well-off friends. Okay, so go to the church. Okay, and the church might not be able to cover it all if it's a really bad situation. So, okay, there's a safety net in the state. 20 to 40, we're gonna set that up. But man, paragraphs 1 through 20 are just so right-wing, aren't they? This is what I was talking about. When
Incredible.
The last 4 days, people have been saying, oh, Rerum Novarum, that's socially liberal and morally and spiritually Catholic and right wing. What are you talking about? You can't direct or pull apart those two concepts. Of these duties, paragraph 20, the following bind the proletarian and the worker, fully and faithfully to perform the work which has been freely and equitably agreed upon. So that's what workers have to give. Also, never to injure the property, nor to outrage the person of an employer, never to resort to violence in defending their own cause, nor to engage in riot or disorder. That's not very woke. And to have nothing to do with men of evil principles, they're talking about socialists, who work upon the people with artful promises of great results and excite foolish hopes which usually end in useless regrets and grievous loss. They're talking about socialists there too. The following duties bind the wealthy owner and employer. Not to look upon their work people as their bondsmen, but to respect in every man his dignity as a person ennobled by Christian character. And they're reminded that according to natural reason and Christian philosophy, working for gain is creditable, not shameful to a man, since it enables him to earn an honorable livelihood. But to misuse men as though they were things in the pursuit of gain, or to value them solely for their physical powers, that is truly shameful and inhuman. So what's beautiful here is it's an appeal to Christian workers to not be envious and not to violate the basic rules as workers. And then to capital, the wealthy, individual wealthy people. Here's why: if you're Christians and you don't want to go to hell, you better pay extra, pay fair market value plus a little bit if it's a really nice or a really good or a really Christian worker. That's what you ought to do. Cut into your profits a little bit to pay a little bit even more than, okay, well, I can get this worker for just, 1% extra. Splash the pot a little bit. Give him 3% extra. Kind of like in Cinderella Man, one of my favorite movies, when there was very little FDR worship in that, surprising little FDR worship. Mm-hmm. When the Bulldog of Bergen ends up going back to work and he becomes friends with his employer. Beautiful, beautiful. The gayest line in the movie is like, I'm all prayed out. I don't like that. But it's a very Catholic movie. It's a very Rerum Novarum movie. He pays back what he gets from the state. There's one sentence that's pro FDR and then one pushback sentence. I love it.
Even the dynamic in the household is very Rerum Novarum. Best
female acting ever, Renee Zellweger in Cinderella Man. I have a specific scene that's just inspiring it to all of the Ask Your Husband readers out there, the people that read Steph or pay attention to Steph on the show. There's a Renee Zellweger, the champion of my heart line. It just gets me every time. What a good woman. And there are some good models of good men. That's one of them. Russell Crowe plays like 3 or 4 of them, even though he's apparently a dick. Maybe he's not. But Renee Zellweger in the last 25 years in Cinderella Man, just beautiful portrayal of an Ask Your Husband wife.
We tell women to watch that movie and really pay attention to Renee Zellweger through that. She makes a mistake in it. You'll know what it is.
She's sorry. She's like, Jimmy, I'm sorry. It's amazing.
But what a good role. What a good it's just it's a lovely tale, and the wife and Renee plays a very good wife in that movie.
Amazing.
So Cinderella Man.
The acting is just the best. Mm-hmm. Top 5 movie for me. But I'm saying it's a great, between him and his worker, his employer at the docks, they become friendly. Then he starts fighting in it again, and his employer admires in him and is following his fights and is lets him keep working with a broken hand. It's really Rerum Novarum, paragraph 20. Here's in the middle of 20 is a long paragraph. We gotta wrap this up.
Okay, here we go.
Hence, the employer is bound to see that the worker has time for his religious duties. So this is also one of the main things. The employer just needs to make sure you're not overworking the guy, because religion's the main key here. You're not living to eat or to get nicer stuff. You're living for religion. You're living for religion. I'm living for religion. That he be not exposed to corrupting influences and dangerous occasions, which overwork could expose him to, and that he be not led away to neglect his home and family or to squander his earnings. This guy needs to be at home with his family. An employer should care about the guy he's employing. Now, we are just doing away with a kind of Marxian materialism on either end of the spectrum, sort of Marxian right, Marxian left, just like the employer. Why do I care about my employees? That's bullshit, right? And that is where you can get off the Locke. Locke is so important to this document. We don't have Rerum Novarum without Locke. That's a fact. These are Lockean Thomists, the 3 guys who wrote it at the Angelicum. And the Lockean theory of property is central to why Leo XIII changed Catholic teaching on property. It's a natural right because of Locke. But now you get into these kind of all right, employers have to care about their employees, and this can't be explained strictly in terms of the market. Now we're getting back to Thomas, okay? And there's nothing socialist or even distributist or fruity about that. Now we're just pure Thomas.
Can you give us this next line is interesting. Furthermore,
the employer must never tax his work people beyond their strength or employ them in work unsuited to their sex and age. So this is, remember, you had a workforce that did comprise some single women, if that's what you meant by the sex and age.
Exactly. I thought people would line up.
Catholic teaching, time immemorial, single women are allowed to work.
Widows, single women
are allowed to work.
The women who are religious. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what he means here. He says at the beginning, I don't think I read it. I think on the Vatican website, there's a little preface, which, and he repeats it a couple times throughout. The point of Rerum Novarum is so that single income households, men alone, who are tasked with working. So we know he's not talking about married women working, but when he says employers should not employ them in work unsuited to their sex and age, yes, that does include single women or divorced women. Father Dave Nix is calling. Sorry, Father.
I can text him on your phone if you need me to tell him you're alive.
All right, thanks. His great and principal duty is to give everyone what is just. So again, still an individual appeal to, and we are going to get to the role of the state in, social safety net, which is part of this. I'm not denying it. We're going to kind of run through it. He says it a lot here in paragraph 20s and 30s. And it's pretty basic. So we're going to go through 20s and 30s fast. And then we're going to break for the day. And we're going to end up in the last third of the paragraphs on Wednesday when we go through Longínqua and we show what is Americanism. Because Pope Leo XIII loved America, was obsessed with America. He really was. He loved it. You've done great things for the cause of religion, he says to America. Just don't get into this separation of church and state stuff, which America was flirting with in the late 1800s. America was founded making separation of church and state illegal. And you've all been brainwashed about it. That's Wednesday's show. And that's in Longínqua. Another one of the, 88 encyclicals of Leo XIII. 21. After the semicolon, the last 10 lines or so. No man can hope for eternal reward unless he follow in the blood-stained footprints of his Savior. Beautiful. If we suffer with him, we shall also reign with him. Beautiful. Christ's labors and sufferings, accepted of his own free will, have marvelously sweetened all suffering and all labor. Beautiful. This gets me right here. And not only by his example, but by his grace and by the hope held forth of everlasting recompense, that he has made pain and grief more easy to endure. For that which is at present momentary and light of our tribulation worketh for us above measure exceedingly an eternal weight of glory. That's just beautiful. So remember, we're going to suffer. Life is suffering. That's not just for Buddhists. They say to try to avoid it. We say, embrace your cross. Unify yourself with Christ by the cross, and you'll be okay. 22, about 2 sentences in. It rests on the principle that it is one thing to have a right to the possession of money and another thing to have a right to use money as one wills, which is wrong. It's basic Thomistic teaching. Private ownership, as we have seen, is the natural right of man. He repeats the Lockean thing here. And to exercise that right, especially as members of society, is not only lawful, but absolutely necessary. It is lawful, says St. Thomas, for man to hold private property, and it is also necessary for the carrying on of human existence. And remember, Thomas never gets over the hump in saying it's a natural right. He just says it's natural and it's necessary, but he never calls it a right. But if the question be asked, how must one's possessions be used? The church replies without hesitation in the words of the same holy doctor: man should not consider his material possessions as his own, but as common to all, so as to share them without hesitation when others are in need. With command the rich of this world to offer with no stint to apportion largely. True, no one is commanded to distribute to others that which is required for his own needs and those of his household, nor even to give away what is reasonably required to keep up becomingly his condition of life. So if you're kind of an aristocrat, remember, this is the Aristotelian virtue of magnificence. Not magnanimity, but magnificence, that you ought to light your mansion at night. You ought to, it's in Thomas it's book 4 of the Nicomachean Ethics, in Thomas's commentary on it, says this is right on magnificence. So because we don't believe in egalitarianism, it's not just that, okay, well, rich people can feed their family, but after that, they have to sell their mansions and give them away and live in a cottage. That's not true, because they're aristocrats. So they have the right and even the duty, according to the Christian Aristotelian virtue of magnificence, light your mansion, spend extra on big rose bushes outside, Pay the workers to beautify the grounds. That's part of your station as an aristocrat.
That's why, like, the queen doesn't live like in a shanty, or,
Right.
The Pope
Right.
shouldn't just live in like a hut,
Right.
right? Like, this is like why we show them honor, because of their magnificence.
Right. Right. So this is Thomas. Man should not considers material possessions as his own, but as common to all after he's already, you're not commanded, Pope Leo says, to distribute to others that which is required for your need and your household, nor to give away what is reasonably required to keep up becomingly your condition of life. For no one ought to live other than becomingly, he says, particularly according to your station, particularly if you're aristocratic. But after you've tended the grounds of your mansion, if you're an aristocrat, you have everything you need, you do live becomingly, it's said in here, well then, what you ought to do, and you're being implored by the Pope, not by the state, you ought to give alms. And that doesn't mean it has to be some public thing. I just am surprised. There are a lot of good people that just give freely, but you go to mass, and if you run into someone that's in need, don't give them a loan. Give them hey, here you go. A loan only gets someone back on their feet for a second, but then they're in a hole. Just give, hey, here's $1,000. If that's all you can do, here's $10,000. If it's a source where they're a Christian family that's down on his luck, the father got injured, lost his job, whatever, I'd give it as soon as I would take it. And I've been in the place to give it and take it in my day, and that's to be a Christian. You should give these grants and take them. A loan's one thing, but a grant's the other. It is a duty not of justice, but of Christian charity, a duty not enforced by human law. So also very non-socialistic. The Pope is saying it's not a duty of justice, it's the duty of charity, and it shouldn't be enforced by human law. You can't force charity at law lest you vitiate its charitability. So that's 22. 23, top sentence. As for those who possess not the gifts of fortune, they are taught by the church that in God's sight poverty is no disgrace. This reminds one of Cardinal Sarah. Mm-hmm. Destitution is evil. When you're eating dirt, your dignity is stripped from. Right. Poverty is good. Poverty is good. Extreme poverty or destitution is evil. That's paragraph 23.
Cardinal Sarah has some really beautiful things to say about poverty.
Mm-hmm. And God or Nothing. Beautiful book. Wish we had him as a pope right now. No offense, Leo the 14th. We're waiting and seeing on you. There's a lot of indications. Paragraph 24. From contemplation of this divine model, it is more easy to understand that the true worth and nobility of man lie in his moral qualities, that is, in virtue. That virtue is, moreover, the common inheritance of men, equally within the reach of high and low, rich and poor. So Pope Leo XIII is calling our minds back to the very unwoke sensibilities of paragraphs 1 through 19, which are really, really right-wing in Rerum Novarum. That the point of everyone, rich and poor alike, being materially provided for according to their station, their variegated, non-egalitarian station along the social continuum, is to build virtue naturally and to build your relationship with religion supernaturally. Those are the two goals. Here he's talking about virtue. So it's so unwoke when it's like, he's going to say time and again, these people need time to spend with their family and to take them to church. And more than that, virtue is the point of society, like Aristotle says all over Nicomachean Ethics, which he called the introduction to the politics. The whole book of the Nicomachean Ethics, whole point of society is to build virtue. Thomas takes that and says, this is Christian. Because it's a rightly ordered thing. Things should be what they are in the best iteration. Mm-hmm. Society should have moral members. And this also was deeply influential on not only Jefferson, but John Adams and the other founders. We talk about that a lot in chapter 1 and chapter 3 of this book on the virtues. The Protestants don't even refer to virtue. Virtue ethics is Aristotelian. Aristotle was the first figure really being revolted against in the Protestant Reformation. That buffoon Aristotle, as Luther called him. And all of the Protestant founding fathers of America in chapter 3 of Catholic Republic, they're all saying you can't have a proper republic without chapter 1, natural rights, chapter 2, subsidiarity, but that's how you build the government. What do you need in the people? In chapter 3 of this book, we say virtues. That's Aristotomist. That's paragraph 24 of Rerum. 25, if Christian precepts prevail, the respective classes will not only be united in the bonds of friendship, but also those in brotherly love. So not just this kind of scratch my back, I'll scratch yours friendship between labor and capital, but even brotherly love if it's a proper Christian society. Paragraph 26 is reasonably redundant. So we skip to 27, first 2 or 3 sentences. On this subject, we need but recall for one moment the examples recorded in history. Of these facts, there cannot be any shadow of doubt. For instance, that civil society was renovated in every part by Christian institutions, that in the strength of that renewal, the human race was lifted up to better things, nay, that it was brought back forth from death to life, and to so excellent a life that nothing more perfect had yet been known before, or will come to be known in the ages that have yet to be. So the church built Western civilization on these social principles. So Leo 13 is not saying they're brand new. And that's para 27. Here in the second full sentence of paragraph 28, he's getting more to, okay, we do, labor, capital does owe the following to labor. That's where we're heading in the 30s paragraphs. By the fact that she calls men to virtue and forms them to its practice, she, the church, promotes this in no slight degree. Christian morality, when adequately and completely practiced, leads of itself to temporal prosperity. If you're virtuous, you will be somewhat prosperous. For it merits the blessing of that God who is the source of all blessings. It powerfully restrains the greed of possession and the thirst for pleasure, twin plagues, which too often make a man who is void of self-restraint miserable in the midst of abundance. This is pure Aristotle, book 4 and book 6 in the Ethics, which you also need to read. We also need to do a deep dive on the ethics, but I have a class on that on timothyjgordon.com. Just go buy that class. We go 10 lectures on the 10 books of the ethics. All right, so this is less cutting edge stuff than the first 19 paragraphs. We're just going to race from here, paragraph 29 to I think 41 is the last one I did. Now we are just saying, in the 30s, you do have the underscoring that this is right wing stuff. Rerum Novarum. 2 brand new Catholic teachings unveiled in Rerum Novarum, very right-wing stuff, but not libertarianism.
And Tim will take super chats at the end of the show, so go ahead and post those now.
29, the church, moreover, intervenes directly on behalf of the poor by setting on foot and maintaining many associations which she knows to be efficient for the relief of poverty. So the church helps to relieve poverty, but it's not just the church that should help to relieve poverty. There should be what's called a social safety net wired into a good state, because a good state has, even Aristotle says this, Aristotle and Thomas, is not socialists or distributists. There is a function within the final cause of the state, the purpose of the state, ens commune, the common good, ens commune is the common being, the common good. You need to account for worst case scenarios, right? Widows, ladies who have a family that are not widowed, but maybe their husband's paralyzed, or he's so untalented, such unskilled labor that they are actually destitute. Paragraph 30 tends to this. The common mother of rich and poor has aroused everywhere the heroism of charity. Charity is heroic, make no mistake, and has established congregations of religious and many other useful institutions for help and mercy, so that hardly any kind of suffering could exist which was not afforded relief. And then we're still talking about the church doing it, but we're moving into saying, okay, after the church is the great reliever of these things, that there should be a function of the state for doing it. At the present day, there are many who, like the heathen of old, seek to blame and condemn the church for such eminent charity. They would substitute in its stead a system of relief organized by the state. See what he's saying here? It should not, in the first place, fall to the state. He's talking about the socialists again. This is mainly for the church. The worst case scenarios can fall to the state, who have greater tax requisitioning power than the church, obviously. But no human expedience will ever make up for the devotedness and self-sacrifice of Christian charity. So he's saying charity is a virtue, Charity as a virtue pertains to the church. So he's saying the main instance of charity is individual Christians and the church acting collectively, as a church, take up a collection for the Thompson family. Their dad had his hands blown off in a horrific gardening accident or whatever it is. But this would be what I'm identifying as a kind of Austrian libertarian document if Leo XIII said it's only for the role of private Christians or maybe the church acting jointly, joint and several Christian action. He doesn't say that. In 31, we get to, it cannot be, however, be doubted that to attain the purpose. Can you read the rest of that sentence? I have a block in the way.
Sure.
Just read all of 31. Would you
It cannot, however, be doubted. Let me highlight it for everybody. It cannot, however, be doubted that to attain the purpose we are treating of, not only the church, but all human agencies must concur. All who are concerned in the matter should be of one mind, and according to their ability act together. It is with this, as with providence, that governs the world. The results of causes do not usually take place save where all the causes cooperate
between the state and church on charity. It is sufficient, therefore, to inquire what part the state should play in the work of remedy and relief. So I've admitted that. It's not a purely libertarian document. I've never claimed it is. It's right-wing. It's close to there because it's like individual Christians and Christians acting jointly with their church, maybe a collection plate, should do their main part is charity. But for worst case scenarios, you do actually have to have a safety net of the church itself. Now, the second or third full sentence of paragraph 32, the foremost duty, therefore, of the rulers of the state should be to make sure that the laws and institutions, the general character and administration of the Commonwealth shall be such as to themselves realize public well-being and private prosperity. So this is Aristotelian, this is Thomist. There has to be a safety net is where we're going. It should be worst case scenario. It should be subsidiarian. It shouldn't be the first turn, but there should be that part. The last sentence is good here in 32. And the more that it is done for the benefit of the working classes by the general laws of the country, the less need there will be to seek for special means to relieve them. So you can't deny this, and I never would. Look at paragraph 32. The most interesting part is the last two sentences. To cite the wise words of St. Thomas, is the part and the whole are in certain sense identical.
You meant 33, sorry.
33, sorry. As the part and the whole are in certain sense identical, so that which belongs to the whole in a sense belongs to the part. Among the many and grave duties of rulers who would do their best for the people, the first and chief is to act with strict justice, with that justice which is called distributive, toward each and every class alike. So justice means giving to each its due. So even as Leo is going through, okay, there should be a safety catch net. He's saying the main part of justice, and Aristotle says this in book 5 of the Ethics, the birthplace of natural law, book 5 of Aristotle's Ethics, is that distributive justice is the main part of the state, meaning giving to each his due. And Aristotle says, is it arithmetic justice, where everyone gets the same, or is it geometric? Of course, Aristotle says geometric. You give to each his due. It's going to be different. We're not talking egalitarianism. So even as paragraph 30 through 39 or so are given over to saying there should be something like a social safety net, a public component of whatever, small welfare component for the state, Leo keeps reminding us that the Thomistic principle is that you never give more than is due. Okay, so he's still very measured in saying that there should be a safety net. In 34, wait, where is it?
Just tell me where in the paragraph so I can highlight it for you if you just say middle or whatever.
It's in the middle of the paragraph. He says, we have insisted it is directly in a most important manner. No, sorry, it is true that since the end of society is to make men better, the chief good that society can possess is virtue. There you go. He repeats that. Nevertheless, it is the business of a well-constituted body politic to see to the provision of those material and external helps, the use of which is necessary to virtuous action. So that's the point. It's just enough to help people be virtuous. Now for the provision of such commodities, the labor of the working class, the exercise of their skill and the employment of their strength in the cultivation of the land and in the workshops of trade, is especially responsible and quite indispensable. Indeed, their cooperation is in this respect so important that it may be truly said that it is only by the labor of working men that states grow rich. Justice, therefore, demands that the interests of the working classes should be carefully watched over by the administration, so that they who contribute so largely to the advantage of the community may themselves share in the benefits which they create, that being housed, clothed, and bodily fit, they may find their life less hard and more endurable. Okay, so this is that safety net. That's it. You know, because they are vital. Labor is vital to capital. Capital is vital to labor. We have to make sure, just as we have to make sure that labor does not grow envious of capital, the state should oversee also that capital does not grow neglectful of labor. Okay, so that's that's why there needs to be a social safety net. 35, we've said that the state must not absorb the individual or the family. Every time he says something safety netish, like in 32 and 33, he balances it out by saying, remember not to go too far. Then in 34, Leo holds up the safety net again. Then 35, he says, but we've said the state must not absorb the individual or the family. Both should be allowed free and untrammeled action so far as is consistent with the common good and the interest of others. This is going to be called 40 years later subsidiarity. It's going to be given an even better proto definition in 36. So that's 35. Listen to 36. This is what Pius XI will 40 years later call subsidiarity. First sentence, whenever the general interest or any particular class suffers or is threatened with harm, which can in no other way be met or prevented, the public authority must step in to deal with it. Let me repeat that. Whenever the general interest or any particular class suffers or is threatened with harm, which can in no other way be met or prevented, meaning you have to go through all the other channels first: individual charity, friends and family, the church, which Leo calls its first charge. Then the public authority must step in to deal with it. That is very specific as a proto-definition of subsidiarity. And he just says, remember, this isn't necessarily even for the workers themselves. It's because if there are things like strikes, it's bad for the common good. If by a strike, this is midway through 36, if by a strike of workers or concerted interruption of work, there should be imminent danger of disturbance to the public peace, or if circumstances were such as that among the working class, the ties of family life were relaxed, if religion were found to suffer through the workers not having time and opportunity afforded to them to practice its duties, if in workshops and factories there were danger to morals through the mixing of the sexes. Did you hear that? The sexes are not supposed to go to factories. Did you hear that?
Well, that's because what, Tim? What's the women who work outside of the home, not infertility, help me out with the stat. What are we looking for?
Oh, infidelity?
Yeah, I kept saying infertility. I'm like, that's not correct.
85%. No, often they're fertile. 85% of infidelity takes place in the workplace today because the mixing of the sexes is immoral in the workplace. Because this man's going to be forced to work around maybe an attractive woman 40 to 60 hours a week. He gets to see his wife like 2 waking hours a day.
Everybody's dressed up and good moods at the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Men and women get along naturally with one another. Who would have thought?
Danger to morals through the mixing of the sexes. Wow. Or from other harmful occasions of evil, or if employers laid burdens upon their workmen which were unjust, or degraded them with conditions repugnant to their dignity as human beings. Finally, if health, sex, or age, if health were endangered, by excessive labor or by work unsuited to sex or age, in such cases, there can be no question but that, with certain limits, it would be right to invoke the aid and authority of the law. Now, he's just saying there's so many limits here. The limits must be determined by the nature of the occasion which calls for the law's interference. So these are only in boundary cases, boundary exceptions. The principle being that the law must not undertake more nor proceed further than is required for the remedy of the evil or the removal of the mischief. So, wow. So that's subsidiarity. It's Pius XI is later going to call this a grave evil if they overstep their mandate. Where's the mixing of the sexes? That's
mixing
hilarious.
of the sexes is like, I have it highlighted on the screen right now. It's like 5 lines up. 2, 3, 4, 6 lines up.
Yeah, that's interesting. The mixing of the sexes. So that's an evil. And it happens. It happens in the workplace because we didn't follow Rerum Novarum. 37 begins interestingly. We're almost done here. Rights must be religiously respected wherever they exist. And it is the duty of the public authority to prevent, this is the whole reason for being of the public authority, and to punish injury and to protect everyone in the possession of his own. Still, when there is question of defending the rights of individuals, the poor and badly off have a claim to special consideration. They can't hire their own attorney, right? So things like, public interest attorneys. The United States has always done this. If you can't hire an attorney, it's very expensive. We'll get you one.
You did a little bit of that in law school, right? It was like pro bono work.
Yeah, did arraignments down on like PB and OB in San Diego. It's very interesting. You'd go in the arraignment thing, and if a guy's got a green bracelet, it's like he's a pedo. If a guy's got like an orange bracelet, he funneled some cash from his business. So they're very different guys hanging out there as well.
Wow. Talk about the mixing of it.
Yeah, don't get those guys together. So the point is, it's subsidiarity, and this is only in the 30s. Everything else sounds extremely right, particularly the first 19 paragraphs to just blow it out of the water that we hate socialism. Then the 30s are just saying, here's the very limited time when, along a subsidiarian basis, the state does a catch net. First of all, there's the duty of safeguarding private property by legal enactment and protection. Most of all, it is essential, where the passion of greed is so strong, to keep the populace within the line of duty. For if all may justly strive to better their condition, neither justice nor the common good allows any individual to seize upon that which belongs to another, or under the futile and shallow pretext of equality to lay violent hands on other people's possessions. So every time Leo goes through and says something that's in the kind of public catch net, safety net interest, he'll go through and he'll say this other thing. We cannot foment socialistic or even distributivistic envy. He concludes this paragraph by saying, but there are not a few who are imbued with evil principles and eager for revolutionary change. He's talking about socialists, whose main purpose is to stir up disorder and incite their fellows to acts of violence. The authority of the law should intervene to put restraint upon such firebrands. 39 continues this. When work people have recourse to a strike and become voluntarily idle, it is frequently because the hours of labor are too long, or the work too hard, or because they consider their wages insufficient. He ends 39 by saying, the laws should forestall and prevent such troubles from arising. They should lend their influence and authority to the removal in good time of the causes which lead to conflicts between employers and employees. So he's just saying you should have just laws, just distributive laws. In 40, it's really the second half that's interesting. In this respect, all are equal. He's this whole Rerum Novarum loudly declares that men are not equal in their talents. But he says, in this respect are all men equal. There is here no difference between rich and poor. That life on earth, desirable in itself, is not the final purpose for which man is created. Religion is why we're created. And we're completely equal in this. There's no difference between rich and poor, master and servant, ruler and ruled, for the same is Lord over all. No man may with impunity outrage that human dignity which God himself treats with great reverence, nor stand in the way of that higher life, which is the preparation of the eternal life of heaven. Nay, more, no man has in this matter power over himself to consent to any treatment which is calculated to defeat the end and purpose of his being is beyond his right. So just saying, we are not with the socialists. The main point of social justice and this minor last resort social safety net is literally so that people can get to church and lead good lives. Okay. And that the final paragraph we're going to deal with today is kind of kind of tells you that this portion of Rerum Novarum is done. The part that the liberals always exaggerated upon will conclude with different stuff from 41 on. 41. From this follows the obligation of cessation from work and labor on Sundays and certain holy days. You're not, the USCCB got really soft on this. You're not allowed to work on Sunday or holy days. The rest from labor is not to be understood as mere giving way to idleness, much less must it be an occasion for spending money and for vicious indulgence, as many would have it to be. But it should be rest from labor hallowed by religion. So again, the socialists have domesticated all this stuff, stripped the Christianity away, and then enlarged upon the social justice component. Leo's just saying, after everything he said in the opening, he's saying, look, in worst case scenarios, the state can help, but it's all pointed back to religion. Okay. You're going to find 42 to, I think, 63 or 64, the last third of this thing, really, really satisfying. It kind of ends how it opened, but with a twist. We get these two new Catholic teachings, not just social teachings. We get subsidiarity prefigured, and we get private property changed into a natural right, even going a little bit above and beyond St. Thomas. It's truly an amazing encyclical. And the Thomistic Pope did his work here, and he's not a social justice warrior, even though he does care about rich and poor alike.
So we're doing 42 through 64 next time, right?
Yeah, 64 is like, he's just like, peace out.
Would you take super chats if you're...
Yeah, let's do
okay. Let's get those going here. Pardon me. Chatosaurus Giga Chad became a new channel member, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Dinosaur.
Nasty Sleaze says, from a fellow TLM supremacist that also attends Novus Ordo masses, is there a particular reason why you only receive the Eucharist at the TLM?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons, but most of them are pedagogical. I don't like my children seeing what goes on in your typical Novus Ordo. The one closest to my house, which we end up at if we're not at the TLM, especially bad. It's in an auditorium, and luckily they still have on holy ground, on their grounds, a little radio station. So if we're going to go there, we typically will stay. It's a COVID era measure they never did away with. Stay in the car, get out on our knee, and they have a radio playing. So we're on the holy ground. We're not just at home listening to it on the radio if we can't make it to New Orleans for Mass. And we'll just get out on our knees in the grass and face liturgical east during the consecration. And then and a lot of times before Mass, the Novus Ordo priest there will be saying hearing confessions. We'll go to that. So we will go to that sacrament. But we really, like the early Christians, you don't, or even anybody who's observing the rules about confession, unless you're going before every week, it's really dangerous to receive communion every week. So we'll go to the TLM about once a month, and we'll make sure we receive there.
And all our kids get their sacraments, first confession, all that sort of stuff at the TLM.
If they see how the Eucharist is being regarded and see all the women around giving the speeches and the warbly voiced women singers singing those awful hymns, it's really there's an anti-religious takeaway, and we don't like that. So we meet our Sunday obligation. As always, I bring the receipts. I make sure to check all the boxes, but we don't like our kids seeing the trappings of the Novus Ordo.
Next super chat question from Sierra. Great job today. Very informative. Lots to chew on.
Thank you.
Comment.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll finish it up. It's not 42 to 64 are really good. They're really, really good also. So tune back in. And then remember, next time we'll also be Longingua about what is Americanism. People, idiot trads gave me a lot of guff when I came out with this book. They're like, Pope Leo hated America. No, he wrote glowingly about how much America has done for the cause of religion, because from 1791 until 1947, Leo didn't know it because he didn't live in 1947, but he saw what was changing. America guaranteed that separation of church and states' rights state was illegal. And he said, you've done so much for the cause of religion, so much for the cause of Christianity. He talked glowingly about how beautiful America was, how virtuous. what was Americanism? We're going to deal with it. We're gonna cite from Longingua to unpack what changed when this country became evil in the 1940s, really after Civil War, but especially after World War II.
When are you doing that show?
That show will be the other part of Wednesday's show. We'll finish Rerum's last third. I portioned it like this. And then we'll do Longingua. And we're not going to do every line in Longingua. I'm just going to give you the big idea of what is Americanism. Even though Leah loved America. What's the deal? People are totally confused about Rerum and Longingua.
Next super chat comment or question. From CB, thank you. What did Pope Leo XIII say about the Freemasons, excommunications, etc.? He sounds based.
He published, I think, two encyclicals of his 88 on the Freemasons. Yeah, you're excommunicated if you go to a lodge. I was always kind of curious to go look. And I was like, oh, I can't do that, just because they're mainly, the low ranking ones are just sort of dorky LARP losers.
They got the sacred ham.
Yeah, they hit each other with the sacred ham and stuff. But I'm like, oh, I can't do that because of all of the excommunications levied for even going on their grounds willingly. So yeah, he's very based.
Wow. Okay.
He's very, very based. And look at that guy. I'm looking at him right now.
I know. Look at that Chad. Miss Gaffney. Thank you. I gave you a $10 super sticker. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Let me see if there's any other. Yep.
Cool. Well, this has
cool
been
beans.
Cool Beans. This has been whoa. How long was this show?
This was 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Yeah, it's hard to do, man. We're doing longer and longer shows. I'll try to make the conclusion to this on the last part of Rerum and Longingua under 2 hours. But it's important stuff. We don't know what Leo XIV is going to do yet. I have a lot of doubts. But I figured this is the best way to be productive in the meantime. He said he took the name because of Leo XIII and because of Rerum. Well, I love Leo XIII and Rerum. I've studied them extensively. So the best I can do without just being a negative Nelly is share with you what's amazing about Leo XIII and what we ought to expect from Leo XIV if he's being honest. God bless you all. Deus Volt.
Oh